can be taken out, and those that were left out that maybe you would like to have more discussion or presentation regarding a certain part of a topic. The second request I have is that if it's okay with Beza, in a week or two after this, we're going to poll you to see if this presentation helped you or motivated you to do your own advanced care planning if you have not done so far, and do your own advanced directives if you have not, and how many of your family members you encourage to do or have them do theirs because of this, and how many patients you were able to help because of the presentation. So this is in an effort for me to try and make it more and more practical as we go along. Okay, so I'm going to. You won't be able to see me anymore, but just wanted to say hello. So because I want to concentrate on the talk and not on the pictures. Okay, so about this conversation on advanced planning, I have no disclosures today that should affect this talk. And there are some learning objectives for today are as follows. At the end of this presentation, hopefully you'll be able to approach patients and families and your own family with confidence regarding advanced care planning and goal setting. Avoid harmful language in conversations with patients and families, and then discuss your own life's living goals with your physician, with your family, and with your friends. And be better prepared to guide families and patients through death and dying. So why are we talking about this? This is a journey that we all must take. So we need to plan and plan well ahead of time. I mean, there's no way around it. The end of life is going to come. And we need to see that when we come to that journey, how can we make it as good as possible and for as long as possible, but as really good as possible for whatever time we may have. So as you well know, that technology has propelled us into the marvel of never imagined wonderful and amazing life savings and life prolonging treatments. So what state of existence these may sometimes leave us is, of course, another story. Unfortunately, many a times, it is an existence that sustains a poor quality of life. So let me start off with an example of how that plays out in many times. So we're going to take the case of Margie, who is a 67-year-old lady with long-standing diabetes and 2 earlier strokes, who was admitted in respiratory failure to the hospital from severe pneumonia and sepsis. She was aggressively treated with antibiotics and artificial ventilation. She was unable to be weaned off the respirator, so she was moved to the long-term vent unit on tracheostomy and a PEG tube in an unconscious state. She remained that way for over 2 months, also receiving dialysis in the end for her renal failure and developing more than about 20 skin ulcers. As you can see, and she's still unconscious, as you can see, the technology can help us keep people alive in any and all kinds of states. So after multiple meetings with the family, and just short of getting a court order to stop life-sustaining treatments, the family finally agreed to take her off the vent and dialysis and let her die in peace. So this is not quite the peaceful, dignified death that we would all hope for. So we, apart from just wasting resources on on a situation that was not of any meaningful use to the patient. There was a lot of moral distress, a lot of consultants, ICU use, social workers, nurses, physicians were involved in this, and of course, the stress on the family as well. Now, if this patient had had previous conversation and advanced care planning done, I can promise you the end would have been better. And why I say that is that every time I've had to do a palliative care consultation on a patient who has had capacity to make their own decisions, they opt for a much less aggressive and more rational options than the families do. So in this patient also, obviously, unfortunately, there have been none of that had been done. So we were left with this situation. But the sad part is that even though the family had not talked to her, the physicians had not approached this either with her in the earlier stages of her illness. And that's where I think we are missing the boat as physicians and healthcare providers, and that's where we need to put our attention to. So doing advanced care planning for yourself, with your family, with your loved one is the best gift you can give to your children or to your loved ones. Because now, if you get into a situation where you cannot make your own decisions and your family has to make your decisions, they can make the decision based on your wishes and your goals and essentially be off the hook in making a very difficult, getting off of a difficult burden of making very serious decisions at the end of life. So this coming Christmas, you don't need to give any gifts, monetary gifts to your family. All you have to do is have this conversation with them. I'm going to start off. So I've worked on multiple ways and doing this and having talked to so many patients over, I would say, hundreds, maybe 1,000 family meetings. Trying to simplify the process so that one can do this in a hospital setting in one sitting. And come up with a one-page, few lines, advance directive that can be very helpful to everybody else. I'm going to start off to show you an example of what that may look like. So here's a retired Marine, and we happen to be a family member of ours, and we happened to visit him about 3 months prior to his demise. And in my conversations, since I've been talking about this forever, I asked him if he ever had this conversation, and he had not. So we sat down and talked to him about his minimum life or minimum existence that he felt was still meaningful to him. And at the end of all that, and this is what we're going to talk about later as to how do you arrive at such a document, he talked about his end-of-life wishes, and this is what they look like. Number one, he said, do not artificially prolong my life if I cannot recognize my family and communicate with them. Number two was, you may treat my illness if I am able to recognize my family and communicate with them. But do not artificially prolong this state by means of dialysis, respirator, or artificial nutrition hydration for more than a week. Number three, if I am totally bedridden, please do not treat any illness, but keep me comfortable with no artificial treatments to prolong my life. And number four, he talked about artificial treatments. He said they are only acceptable if I can be rehabilitated to the goals as mentioned above. And he didn't want to be a burden to anyone or anyone to die at home. So as you can see, number one, he's talking about his mental awareness and mental level. And number two, he's talking about the illness and his mental level and some artificial treatments. Number three, he's talking about his physical level of function. And of course, number four, he's also talking about artificial treatments. So as you can see, this is a very simple document, and decisions can be made very easily depending upon these wishes. So as luck would have it, about 3 months later, he had injury to his leg. And by the way, I forgot to mention, he was in his 90s at this time, and when he made this. And anyway, so he had his leg injured and result into a gangrene and sepsis. So he was totally bedridden now. Before he was able to walk some, and he was not as really conscious as to what was going on. And the doctors asked his wife as to what to do in terms, and they gave her choices. One was that to save his life, they would wanted to amputate his leg. Otherwise, they could not really save him. So when the wife asked me for my opinion, I said, let's look at his wishes. And his wishes were very clear that he didn't want to be bedridden. He was almost totally bedridden already. Now he definitely was. He was barely functional before, although he still could eat. But with this, if with the amputation, he would be bedridden, which he didn't want to be. Actually, if you look at his wishes, he said, if I'm totally bedridden, don't treat any illness. And based on, anyway, his advance directives, his advanced care planning, his wishes, the wife decided we did not want him amputated, wanted to just keep him comfortable, and actually wanted to even stop antibiotics and let him die in peace. So she was able to make this decision because she had had this conversation. In spite of that, every month she would call and say, did I make the right decision? And we would take out the advance directive, look at it, and help her to be at peace that yes, she did the right decision. So this is just an example to show how this can be helpful. Wife's own end-of-life wishes were very similar to the husband, except she said, if I'm totally bedridden, it is okay by me as long as it is not by artificial means such as dialysis, respirator, and artificial tube feedings and IV hydration. So in other words, if she was in his state and she could still enjoy the food, she didn't mind being bedridden. So if this was her instead of her husband, we may have made a different decision. So the next question is, why must we talk? Now, and the reason for that is the future is so uncertain, and the COVID has, the coronavirus has made us realize that you think that things are going fine, but things can change in a hurry. And as you know, anybody can lose their decision-making capacity from trauma or illness or disease, and then the decision burden goes on others, and you're in a danger of being forced to live in a way that you didn't want to, and there is a lot of pain and suffering for self and others because we did not have this conversation. And there's also a chance that you may not die where and how, that as you wish. Because we have this advanced planning doesn't guarantee that we will die the way we wish, but at least there's a better chance that we would, or that we would live the way we wish, or as close to as the way we wish. So this process of talking to everybody about their end of life and their living is what advanced care planning is. So it's a process that is essential for all adults at any age, regardless of their state of health, whether they're well or whether they're ill. It helps them understand and share with family and healthcare givers their personal values, life goals, wishes, and preferences regarding future quality of life and medical care. Now, advanced care planning may include the completion of advanced directives. And many times, these conversations lead to a document that we call advanced directive that can include a living will and a durable power of attorney designation for healthcare decisions. The intent of the advanced care planning is to see that the patients receive treatments and care that is in accordance with their goals, values, and beliefs. So the research has shown that patients agree that advanced care planning can improve multiple outcomes, especially in patients with serious illness. So these benefits are improved quality and length of life in patients with malignancies as well, increased rates of completion of advanced directives, and it also reduces stress, anxiety, and depression in the surviving relatives, reduction of hospitalizations at the end of life, increased likelihood that the patients will die in their preferred place, and increased use of hospice services, which make the end of life, of course, better for all these patients. So as you can see, why advanced care planning is a good thing and an essential thing for everyone to do. The fact right now is there only about 1/3 of all inpatients have an advanced directives or have had any conversations, and 1/3 of Medicare's $700 billion budget is spent in the last 6 months of a person's life. So if we can improve that, we can decrease the cost on ourselves, on society as well.
Dr. Aziz, quick question.
Yeah.
Could you, I think you briefly went over living will and durable power of attorney. Can you define those two terms before we move on?
Thank you. See, I always think, oh, people just know these terms, but thanks for asking. Yeah, so the living will is your where you're defined as to how, but when I first talking about living will, I said, what's the difference between a living will and an ordinary will that people have? So the ordinary will that people have really comes into play after you die. So the living will is coming into play while you're still living, and it talks about your decisions or your wishes as to how you want to live, what kind of a treatments you are willing to have, and how you want to be treated near the end of life when you get ill and so on and so forth. And the durable power of attorney is for a healthcare decision. So this is your choice and your designation of a person that you wish to make decisions for you regarding your health and care if you cannot make your own decisions. And we'll be addressing that again a little bit later.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so the ethical dilemma before the physicians and healthcare providers is that if we are helping prolong somebody's life by artificial means, is that life meaningful to that person? And if not, are we just prolonging the dying process and prolonging the suffering? So this is the ethical dilemma that is before us, and to help resolve that is to have this advanced care planning, so that if the goal is to have a meaningful life to that patient, we need to ask what is that meaningful life to that specific individual person. And that only can happen by having the conversation with them and doing the advanced care planning. I did want to address the fact that when we say prolonging life by artificial life prolonging treatments, those treatments do not have to be um, ventilators and dialysis and pacemakers. Of course, all those are life prolonging treatments, but it may be as simple as your treatment for your diabetes, insulin for the diabetes, antibiotics, and even artificial nutrition hydration, or any medicine that is helping to prolong your life. Could be thyroid medicine, could be heart medicine. So if we are doing any of those things and the patient is having a meaningful life, great. If not, we need to rethink as to what we are doing. Okay? So let's go on. So to know what is meaningful to a person, we need to ask the person. Meaningful life for people has a different meaning, and what we want to address is the minimum level of a life that is still meaningful to them. And for that, we have to talk to that person. And the timing for that and the time to talk is now, because we do not know when one may lose their capacity to make decisions from all kinds of causes that we had just talked about earlier. Okay? So when do we talk to the patients? Now, they don't have to be ill to talk. We can talk to patients on their regular well visit. So I did my own about 15, 20 years ago. And I've had my family members do theirs, and even have my adult children at least talk to them. I'm not sure they have it in writing yet, but at least we've talked about those. So you can talk at a regular office visit, or at any illness or hospital admission. At initial diagnosis of a life-limiting illness, definitely, if it hasn't been done before. Then at hospital admission with a life-limiting illness or an ICU admission. So the sad part is that we see patients being admitted to the hospital multiple times, and these conversations have never happened before. They get admitted to the hospice many times without these conversations happening.
Sure. Dr. Aziz, so quick questions on who should have an advanced directive. What if someone is healthy? I think what COVID has revealed is right now, like anyone could be at a danger of just getting this very severe virus. But
Right.
so I think in terms of advanced care planning, if you're healthy and young, should you still be having conversations about your end of life wishes with your primary care provider?
Yes, the answer is yes. The expectation now is that every adult should be having these conversations, and because you can lose your capacity to make decisions. Anybody can at any time. And we see a lot of children, young adults with trauma and some other illnesses where they have lost their capacity to make decisions. And it's one of the most heart-wrenching times for parents to have to then make decisions for them. So you'll, of course, you have to remind them, everybody, that just because we have this conversation and you make your decision today on a subject or on your treatments, it's not etched in stone. So tomorrow you change your mind, you can change your decision. Okay, and you're only doing this because if somebody else has to make your decision, you want them to make decision dependent upon what your values are and what is important to you.
Okay.
So,
Now, Rachel has a question here. How do you apply this, which is a really great question, Rachel, by the way. How do you apply this to the treatment of COVID? And how does one know if such treatments, such as ventilation, will work to help the person recover?
yeah. So a number of issues come up when you're coming to a specific illness and a specific decision. So first of all, you have to see what your baseline function is. So let's say a 30, 40, 50-year-old healthy, totally healthy person may have a different decision than a 60, 70, 80-year-old who has multiple comorbidities. Okay. So putting all that together and seeing what your chances of coming through, you may make a slightly different decision. So I can very close relative of mine who is in her 70s and has a few medical issues. Decided when we were talking to her about this that if she doesn't mind going on a ventilator if she does not have the COVID. But if she has the COVID, she does not want to go on a ventilator. So she was very specific about that itself. Actually some of the studies have shown that patients, and now we have treatments, right? For at least we have some treatments, have shown that those treatments you would want to get before you go on the ventilator. So if you're on oxygen, and then you would do better with those treatments. Once you're on the ventilator, you would not. So let's say if you are in a marginal health, you're mostly bedbound, but you can get up with help, and your daily existence is okay, but you don't really feel great about it. You may make a different decision and say, if I get the COVID, I don't want to be either even treated, or if I want to be treated and you think I'm getting worse and I'm going to go on a ventilator, just let me go because my chances are very, very bad. So you're going to have a very serious discussion, sit down with your physician and look at the options and see whether you would want to those treatment or not. So this decision is hard to sort of make on your own without talking to and getting some medical input into it. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have many opportunities to talk to the patient, and like I said, we want to talk to them while they can make their own decisions. Now, as long as the patient can make his own decisions, you don't need any advanced directive because you just talk to the patient and find out what their wishes might be. In my personal experience, every time I get a consult in the hospital, my first question is, does the patient have capacity to make decision? If they say yes, I am there lickety split because I want to talk to that patient before they lose capacity. These are the patients who are in the hospital, in ICUs and so on, who are very sick and can lose capacity anytime. Because again, I know they will choose a lot more rational and reasonable choices, make better choices than their family will. Again, a reminder that it is not etched in stone. That's the first thing I tell them. Our conversation is about how you feel about certain treatments and life today. Tomorrow you change your mind, you can. So don't be afraid to make or have these conversations today. The POA, or the power of attorney for healthcare decisions or advocate for healthcare decisions, is not the same as your power of attorney that takes care of your states and your money and so on. It can be the same person, but doesn't have to be the same person. And my advice here is to choose, and it doesn't have to be your relative, it doesn't have to be your closest relative. It has to be the person. Choose the person who is maybe a little bit removed, who you think is not going to get too emotional, making these hard decisions for you, and that you can trust. The important thing here is that you need to talk to this person and tell them what your wishes are so that they can support you in what you may want in the future, and are well aware and have had nice conversations with you. So it's not just picking somebody who doesn't even know that they are the healthcare decision maker for you if you cannot make your own decisions. All right? So now we're going to talk about three questions that will help you define the minimum acceptable levels of life for that person, and which actually defines the level at which place you can stop aggressive treatments if you cannot reach that life. So it helps out in decision making for treatments. So the first question is, if your condition worsens, what minimum level of decreased mental awareness is acceptable to you with the help of life-prolonging treatments? And as if you remember the example I gave you, their minimum level for that person was ability to recognize and communicate with his loved ones. Second question would be, what is the minimum level of physical functioning that is acceptable to you with life-prolonging treatments? And for that, the retired Marine we talked about, his level he picked was that as long as he can get out of bed is fine, but below that was not fine. And if he was totally bedbound, there was not an acceptable level of physical function that he wanted to live with, and he actually wanted you not to treat any illness if he got sick, but just keep him comfortable. Third question is, what life-prolonging treatments are acceptable to use and for how long are not acceptable in an effort to get you to your minimum acceptable levels of function? And if you remember in the example we gave, what was acceptable to him was 1 week of aggressive treatments to show that he's improving. If not, he wanted you to stop after that. This actually is a very important question because otherwise people get stuck on aggressive treatments and nobody knows when to stop or how to stop. So having a time limit whenever we start these aggressive treatments to show that this is a trial period and we are willing to give it so much time, and if there's no improvement after that, these can be stopped. These discussions can happen with the family before the aggressive treatments are started is very helpful because everybody knows what they're for. Without that, the impression we give to the family is that we can get it all better and this is going to happen, and they just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and everybody's suffering in the process. Okay? So when I approach the families, I'm just going to give you an example as to how I talk to them about the mental awareness level. So I start with the lowest level. But people, even yourself, if you were just to think about it, it's hard to come up as to what do we mean by this. So I usually give them examples, and you'll have to give examples to your family and your patients as well. Say, okay, let me help you with this. So let's start with the lowest level, which is total unconsciousness and no awareness, and of course, no chance of recovery. If there's a chance of recovery, then we say, okay, we're going to give you enough time to see how much recovery you have. So if that is the level it would it be okay with you to live like that? And I've yet to say anybody say, yes, I want to live like that. So the next level would be that you are semi-conscious. You might open your eyes now and then, but beyond that, there's nothing. There's no interaction. There's no awareness. And the next level would be that you're starting to focus and see things, but there is no interaction with people. And the next would be that you can focus on people and you seem to be recognizing, but there is no communication. And better than that is that there is communication of some sort, and better than that, there is communication verbally. I've had patients who have said, if I cannot have verbal communication, I don't want to be artificially kept alive. And there are others who say, as long as there's communication of some sort, it's okay. And I had a very nice example of a lady who was on actually a vent, and she was on dialysis, and she was able to come off the vent, but she couldn't come off the dialysis. And I talked to her, and she said, as long as I can recognize my daughter and talk with her, please continue whatever it is you're doing to keep me here. And once I stop doing that, then you can stop everything. And it's good that she had her capacity to make her decisions. And we had this conversation because in about a week later, she was totally unconscious and unable to talk to her daughter. And everybody was at peace at putting the daughter at stopping the life prolonging treatments. So these conversations can happen even at the in ICUs and can be very helpful in making later on in making the hard decisions. Okay. So just remember the goals of care drive the plan of care. So when we first started talking to these families about their advanced care planning, I'm talking about the sick ones now. Your question is not what treatments you want or don't want. The question really is how you want to live and don't live. And what is the minimum level at which you want to live and how. And that is your goal of care. So that is your goal you want to achieve. And now we can talk about the plan as to how to get you there. And if we can't get you there, then we talk to you about the next goal. Okay? As long as, of course, you have capacity. There's a very nice quote in one of the poems by my favorite poet, Mary Oliver, who said, "Are you breathing just a little and calling it a life?" So I think what she's asking us is, how are you living your life? And what do you call life? And are you living well enough to get food out of life that you want? Which sort of fits right into our minimum levels of life that you would say, this is still a life for me.
So, Dr. Aziz, we have a comment and also a question wrapped up in one here. So some ethnic groups and groups don't like to talk about advanced care planning or living wills. Do you educate such groups of people via outreach programs to talk to them? So I think this question is about cultural sensitivity and how different cultures approach end-of life and advanced care planning and how we do outreach in that sense. How do you, I think from outreach perspective, yes, we do here at Montgomery Hospice try to our best to educate each group with cultural sensitivity scope. But how do you do that from your perspective, Dr. Aziz, when the culture doesn't necessarily align with, or
right.
This is a taboo?
Right. So when let's say when I'm asked to do a consult on somebody, and no matter what background they are, one of the questions I always ask is for them to tell me as to part of this is my learning about what is important to them. So, which may have religious background or cultural overtones. So you tell me what is important to you, so I can help you achieve what is important to you. So I never assume that I know how they feel, because I've seen even in my own culture and my own religion, and that people make different decisions and have different value systems of their own. So I think the worst thing we can do is to assume that we know how the different communities uh, approach end of life, because even in that community, individuals approach it differently. So I think as we just need to be sensitive to the fact that we don't know, and um, let's say it was you, Beza, I don't know your
Right.
culture, but even I may have some idea about your culture, but I don't know you. So I approach you, say, for you to educate me as to what is important to you. So I think if you always ask that question, you sort of get through this hesitation of what are you trying to tell us. Okay. So if there's, and I'm not talking about the in people who are sick, right? And I'm trying to help them or get them to do advanced care planning. So all I say is we're going to do our best to get you better as well as we can. But if things don't go well, I need to know what is important to you so that we can help you achieve what you want. So,
Absolutely. And I think
so
that's
that
the
is advanced care planning. You don't, if you don't want to use the word advanced care planning, you you don't have to. But that is advanced care planning.
right.
Wanting to know their wishes, their preferences, their goals. What do they wish to happen? And if that cannot happen, then we need to be honest and truthful with them and tell them why that cannot happen. What is the next goal that they would want to achieve if the one they want to achieve can't happen?
Right. And I like what you said about don't assume, and I think that's the driving force as to how we do also education, is
Right.
and how we approach our patients is asking them what's important to them. That is the core and the driving force of how we approach our education, as well as getting to know the culture and understanding it, and going from there and not assuming. And
Right.
so when we're talking about either it is the Asian population, which the next webinar actually would be on that, or Hispanics or African Americans, everyone have their own views, cultures, and values. And we first have to begin from understanding it and then moving from there.
Right.
um, and I hope that addresses your question.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's always good to get some knowledge about the different cultures and their thoughts. But when when that's it, when the rubber meets the road, it's just that one person and that one family, and their thoughts and their preferences may be very different than what the culture you think desires. So I never assume I know any culture to any extent where I can make decisions, or I just ask them. I said, I don't know. I want to know you. Actually, when I'm talking to the patients, let's say I'm talking to a family and we're talking about their father, and I said, I don't know your father. So please tell me the story of your father, how he was and what was important to him. So not just even the family, but the patient can be very different. And I know in my own family, uh, some are very religious, or some are not, and some have changed their religion. So, you know, so we are from the same cultural background, but now our thought processes have changed, and what's important to us has changed, and how we face life has changed. So just get to know the person as well as you can, and that will help you.
Wonderful.
Okay, are we good?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Um, I wanted to address CPR. So when we're talking about all this, I and when I do a consultation, really, with serious patients who are getting life-prolonging treatments, um, usually in the very beginning, I say that there are many difficult decisions that have to be made. And part of my job as a palliative care physician is to help you make choices that will be good for the patient and that you all will be at peace that the right things are being done for the patient, which means anything that is of benefit is being done and that is of not benefit is not being done or will not be done because it only causes more pain and suffering. And resuscitation is one of the easier decisions of all the decisions because they've clear-cut criteria when we know that CPR is not indicated. It's not indicated for people with terminal illnesses where we know that the patient is going to die. Where you're expecting the patient to die, CPR is not the thing to do. Patients with a lot of multi-organ failures is not the thing to do. So what I tell them is that if we think the CPR is going to be helpful, that all aggressive treatments will be given to you as long as we think they're going to get you to your minimum goals that you have just defined. And if not, then we won't give you those treatments. So some patients will say, I do not want to be resuscitated. So my question to them is, why don't you want to be resuscitated? And see that they're making their decisions on good knowledge and good information and not under false pretenses. Because now some people think, oh my gosh, CPR is terrible. But it's not terrible. It's very good for the right person and it is not the right thing for the wrong person. So make sure that they understand what CPR is and what it's supposed to do and why it's done. So if it's done for the goals that they want to achieve and we can achieve those goals, then it should be done. But anyway, do not attempting resuscitation, DNAR. There are three reasons when you don't resuscitate patients. One is when it is not going to work, it's futile, not going to work of no benefit. Second is that the patient's life will have a very poor quality of life after or before the CPR. So if the patient's quality of life is very poor before and is rather not want to live that way than to force him to try to live in a worse state, it doesn't make sense. Or right now the patient's quality of life is sort of acceptable, but he says he doesn't want to live any worse than this, then we know that after cardiac arrest, the patient will be in a much worse state, and therefore you making him a resuscitate makes sense. Okay. This is something I'd like you to remember, that the mere availability of a treatment is not an obligation on us to offer it as an option. So the best example I can give you for that is G-tubes in patients with severe dementia. It is not the thing to do. It is not helpful. So when I have a patient with dementia, I tell them right off that at some point you're going to stop eating and drinking. I want you and the family to know that putting a tube in is not doing you any favors and therefore will not be done, and we're going to take it off the table as an option right now. So as long as you give reasons to the patients why you are not offering those treatments, they understand. And it is good to do that right in the beginning and then talk about the treatments that can be of help to the patient.
Dr. Aziz, can physicians refuse to give treatments that they think are futile or ineffective or unethical?
Yeah. So that's my next slide of what we call medical DNR. So ethically speaking, okay, a patient has every right to refuse treatments even though it may cost him his life, okay? That's the autonomy of the patient. You cannot force a treatment on a patient. So he can say no. The reverse is that as a physician, you cannot be forced to give treatments that are ethically wrong or medically ineffective. So you also can say, no, I'm not going to give you this treatment. Let's say, Beza, you come to me and you have a severe headache and you say, I know I had a friend who had headaches and so on and so forth, and she got radiation and got better, so I want radiation for my headache. Okay? If it is not the right treatment, I can say no. I'm just giving you sort of a way out there example. And we do the same thing with medical, what we call a medical DNR. As you can read, it says physician under no obligation provide treatments that are medically ineffective, non-beneficial, or ethically wrong. So where we think that resuscitation is wrong and you're being forced to do it, two physicians can document under the law that this treatment will not be beneficial to the patient and therefore we are not going to resuscitate the patient. Their action is not causing the death of the patient. What they're saying is, if the patient dies, we're not going to try to resuscitate because it will not work. And you cannot stop treatments, but you cannot stop treatments without families okay if it will cause immediate death of the patient. So the patient is on a ventilator already, and stopping the ventilator will cause the death of the patient, and the patient is saying, and family is saying no, then that you cannot do right away. But under the law also that can be done by giving patient time, transferring the patient to somewhere else and so on. That's another long and our discussion in itself. Okay. But yes, you don't have to give treatments that are ethically wrong or medically ineffective. A good way to understand this also is that there are a number of physicians that feel that, let's say, abortion, they don't do abortions. We know that it's legal, but as a physician, you don't have to do it. So you can say no to the patient, that no, not going to do abortions. There are medical institutions that don't do that. So that patient would have to find somebody else who feels ethically it is okay. Physician-assisted suicide is another thing that ethically some people feel is wrong, and of course, legally, there are states that feel it is okay, and there are states that feel it is not okay, legally. So
Right.
just because it's legal doesn't mean it's ethical, right?
Right.
So just so it was unethical in Maryland, and it became ethical in Oregon. No, if it is unethical, it's unethical. If it is ethical, it's ethical. But legally, people have agreed, okay, it's okay over here, but not over here. So the point I'm making is just because it's legal doesn't make it ethical. And just because it's ethical doesn't mean it's going to be legal. Okay?
Okay. So we have some really good questions here. In this era, Emily asks, in this era of hospitalists, how can patients be certain they're treating MD knows their wishes?
Aha. So this was going to come later, but we'll do this now. Well, let's say you have the best thing to do is to have your wishes written out. I mean, have an advance directive, all right? And either take a copy, you must take a copy of your advance directive with you anytime you go to a medical institution. And you should have information in your wallet, in your purse, that says that you have an advance directive, who is your POA for healthcare decisions, power of attorney for healthcare decisions, and how to contact them, because they would have a copy of your advance directive. So make sure you have that, because if you don't have capacity to talk to the doctor, they need to have that document that says what is important to you. Let's say you have capacity, you do not have an advance directive. When you go to a hospital, they always ask, do you have an advance directive or not? But you say you do not, but you can say, yes, but I want to talk about my care and my wishes to somebody. But as a physician, all physicians are well attuned to this now, that they would ask you about the treatments and so on and so forth. But to have this complete, detailed discussion may not happen until you're already into a good part of your treatment, because when you go to a hospital in a dire strait, there are many other things that doctors are busy trying to save you and take care of you. If you're in a hospital and or your loved one has a serious conditions going on, my advice, and this is what I advised my friend about a week ago, whose wife was has Alzheimer, had a stroke, was in the hospital, and he called me for my help. And my advice to him was twofold. One, do not let the PEG tube be put in, which they were going to do the next day on this patient with severe dementia. And second, I was get a palliative care consult right away, to have you talk to a palliative care person. And most institutions now have palliative care consultants who have this right bent of what is the right thing to do for the patient, and not just do a treatment because it's available. And that actually saved him a lot. They were able to stop the G tube from being put in, talk to the palliative care person who helped them get the patient in a hospice right away, where she is now, dying peacefully. So if you think nobody has talked to you about your wishes, just say to the doctor, I want to talk about what I want to achieve, my goal or not. Hopefully they've talked to you already. And if you're in the hospital, if not, you can just ask for that and ask for the palliative care consult. If you think things are being done that you don't agree with, you can also ask for an ethics committee consult to get to the answers.
Dr. Aziz, I'm just going to interject here. We still have a few. It is noon right now, and I want to be very respectful of everyone's time, but we still have a few slides to go through, and I think it's worth a while. We are going to give an hour and a half CEU if you need the credits for it. We're going to continue the conversation and offer you the recording of it if you had to be somewhere. But we are going to continue the conversation beyond the promised noon time, end time. I think you guys are asking some wonderful questions. So if you have to leave, I just wanted to mention that we're going to send you a follow-up with the PowerPoint as well as the recording, so that you can listen to what you miss if you decide to go now. There's another question here that I wanted you to address before we move on, which was, who decides what's ethically wrong? And I think that's a really wonderful question, especially I think at some point through the COVID-19 pandemic, at the height of it, we were talking about rationing of care. And so who decides what's ethically wrong? And are there guidelines?
That's where ethics committees come in handy. And this is not one person is not deciding. This is a discussion that happens between experts and consultants and the families. So the family's input is very important. And like you said, different cultures and some things change. So these are on these kind of issues. This is where you would ask for a ethics committee consult and have ethicists involved in the discussion. Okay, I think that's the simplest way I can answer this. So it's not one doctor's decision. Ethics committees can be called by anybody who is a patient or the patient's family, and anybody taking care of the patient. Can be a nurse. When I was chairing the committees, I had medical students, nurses, doctors, social workers call, or the family call. So anybody who thinks something not right is being done or planned can call the ethics committee. Okay.
Wonderful.
So let me quickly run through some of the slides. So we were talking about the medical DNR where the two physicians can make the uh, uh, documentation and the decision. If the family still disagrees, they can change the physician or the hospital, or they can get a court order to force a CPR. Okay, it's not suing you. So I just tell them ahead of time, you want to go somewhere else, you can, but we cannot do this because of the following reasons. And most families actually are happy not to make that decision. And they actually thank you for making decision because now they don't have to have it. I think I've had only one patient in all these years who said no or we had to go to the ethics committee and the hospital administration and so on and so forth. Okay. I did want to touch upon dementia. And the reason I'm doing that is as I look at my cases in the hospice, a good 20 to 30% have dementia. Okay, at least on my team, because I just counted them this morning. And every time I give this talk and I do some education of the public at the Chautauqua Institute where I go in the summer, every time people ask, how about dementia? If I get dementia, can I end my life? How can I end my life? So there's a lot of fear about dementia, and dementia is a very sad and disease because it's a slow deterioration of person's mind and function. So my advice to you is that if you get dementia or your family or somebody you know has dementia, especially in the early stages of dementia, they still have capacity to make their decision, please talk to them. And the best way to do is to get the fast staging. Those of you who may not be familiar with it, it's called functional assessment staging for Alzheimer's and dementia. And if you can go on, just put on the computer fast staging, FAST, for dementia, and it'll come up. So what I now do is I take a copy of that staging, stage 1 through 7, and I give it to the family or the patient, and I say, tell me where you think your loved one is, to make the point as to how severe they are. And dementia causes gradually decreasing function of all systems and finally death. So if you're in early stages of dementia, go through that and see at what level of functioning, which is actually coming back to our 3 questions essentially, you would say, I wouldn't want to live like that. Even with dementia, I don't want to be at that stage. And then what they can do is see that they are made no resuscitation prior to that stage, because once you die, you essentially have a cardiac arrest, and you are resuscitated, you'll be at a much lower level. So if you don't want to be, let's say, live at stage 6C, then when you're at an earlier stage, let's say 6 or 5, you ought to probably be a do not resuscitate. Okay, so this is something to talk to your physician about seriously, and so that you don't get it. The other problem is stopping eating and drinking in later stages of dementia. And now there are states that have said that you can write that in your advance directive, and it will be followed. If you have dementia, your family can stop your eating and drinking when you reach to a stage where you have defined in your advance directive ahead of time. Because we see a lot of sad cases of dementia being kept alive by one means or another. So I want you to sort of think about that. I want you to talk to your physicians about it. You can go to you can go to my blog, you can go to my book, you can go to Compassion and Choices and look at that, okay? The other thing I want you to remember is organ donation. It is one of the best things we can do for the rest of humanity is to donate organs. And think about that, and you can put that also in your advance directive document. Here's the culture sensitivity part, but again, please go to the, now you can complete for advanced directives, you can either write down yourself about the 3 questions we talked about, and write down yourself on a piece of paper, type it, sign it, have 2 witnesses sign it, and now you have a legal document about your advanced directives. You do not, in the state of Maryland, you don't even need notary to notarize your signatures, okay? And you do not need to go to a lawyer. You can. Lawyers do a good job also of this. So you can go to a lawyer and have a legal document that way, but you can make it yourself. So you can either do the My End of Life Wishes plan, is like what I showed you earlier with the gentleman, or you can go to 5 wishes, or you can use the advanced directives that the state has provided. If you already have an advanced directive, I say think about the 3 questions that we talked about, and you can always add to your minimum levels to your advanced directive, and it will be even better or more complete advanced directive. And then you can give copies to your friends, families, physician, to the hospital, of course, and to the lawyer, if you have one, so they know what is important to you, and carry a wallet card that indicates you have advanced directive. Okay? Just a word about MOLST, do you understand what MOLST is? MOLST form, or the Maryland Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, and like the name says, these are orders by a physician for different treatments, for resuscitations, etc. These are not advanced directives, but they are orders, but they are usually written after discussion with the patient about their wishes. So these are orders dependent upon what the patient's wishes are, but these are physician orders. If any one of your family, yourself, or your patient wants to be or is a do not resuscitate, they need this order to have in place so that when EMTs come, if somebody calls 911, they do not get resuscitated. Without this order, they'll get resuscitated no matter what their wishes. A few things about different words that are helpful to you, what to use, what not to use. So this is what you don't want to say. There is nothing more that we can do to a patient, because there's always something more that we can do to help them have a better end, to help them have a better life. So, and please stay away from they are not ready for palliative care. So we don't go to a patient and say, are you ready for palliative care? Can we call a palliative care consult? You don't go to a patient and say, can I call a infectious disease consult on you, or a GI consult on you? You as a physician or the healthcare team decide that this will be good for the patient, then you just tell them we have called for palliative care consult, and advise to them what palliative care is. Palliative care is not do not give treatments. Order, a DNR order doesn't mean do not try to advance the person's life. These orders are very specific for a certain situation. So a lot of misconception that palliative care means, oh, you don't just want comfort care now. Not at all. Palliative care now is started right along when the diagnosis is first made for, let's say, a serious illness. So it's another layer of support to the patient. And when the patient's life is short, like 6 months or less, then they get palliative care. During that time, we just call it hospice. Hospice is just a means of getting paid by the Medicare during that time of the end. But palliative care, it can be given right along for years and years, along with the aggressive treatments or curative treatments. Asking patient, do you want everything done? Again, doesn't make sense because who doesn't want everything done? But the sentence should be, do you want everything done to achieve what? So we'll do everything. My usual words are, we'll do everything that is of benefit to you. Everything that is of benefit has been done, is being done, and will be done. Treatments that are of no benefit, that means they're not going to get you the goal where you want to, or cause more pain and suffering instead of making you better, will not be done. So they'll be either stopped, withheld, or won't be given. Okay? So there's no such thing as getting the DNR. It's only doing what is the right thing for the patient. Here are some helpful phrases that you can use. And they are asking the patient what they're hoping for, saying, I can see this is not what you were hoping for, and I'm sorry to say we cannot get you what you're hoping for. I wish we could do that. I wish we had better news. I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. I can only imagine how this feels to you. I appreciate that you do or don't want to know what to expect. I am worried for you. I wish the following for you. Let's talk about the goals to be achieved. I will pray for you, with you. Many times families say we believe in miracles, and I say, I actually hold their hand. I say, let's together pray for a miracle, but let's also talk about what if the miracle doesn't happen, how to best take care of you. When patients say, I want everything done, again, I say it's an incomplete sentence. You want everything done to achieve what? What goals do you want to realize by everything done? And they explain to me what everything is, okay? So everything that is of benefit, again, to the patient will be done. So here's some useful resources. I think I don't have the name of my book here, but Beza mentioned, it's called Courageous Conversations on Dying. The Gift of Palliative Care is available on Amazon. But here are some other very good resources you ought to check out. If you're very computer savvy, you want to do your advanced directives online, you can go to mydirectives.com and do it online. But I really prefer the hard copy. Even if you do it online, have a hard copy that you can carry with you, take it to the hospital, because to find things online can become very difficult. Okay, so you'll have a copy of this if you, Beza's going to send you those. So thank you very much, and I'm open for more questions. If anybody, I see about 50 some folks are still here. So if you have any questions, I can be here all afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aziz. I really sincerely want to thank you for your time and for staying on longer than we intended. But here is your opportunity to really ask Dr. Aziz if you have any lingering questions, or if I missed something throughout, please go ahead and type it in the chat box, or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask live. Before you do that, just let me know you're about to do that so I know that there isn't an interference. As you think about your questions, I do want to say that my colleague is sharing a link to an evaluation form. It wouldn't take you more than a minute or so. Please complete that eval. It does really help us improve our programs. So we ask you to do that before you log out today. All the resources that are discussed today, I will send them in a follow-up email, which I would send today or tomorrow, as well as Dr. Aziz's book, a link to the Amazon page. I highly recommend, if you don't have it, this is a book we actually give out for our graduates of certificate and in-depth life care program, because we know how valuable this book is. So I highly encourage you to check it out. Again, it's called Courageous Conversations on Dying, the Gift of Palliative Care. I will share the link to that book as well. With that said, if you are not a candidate to our certificate in the life care program, please go ahead and let me know. And if you're interested in it, signing up for it is very simple. All you have to do is show interest, and we will add you to the 300 plus professionals who are pursuing the program right now. We are hoping to graduate our second cohort this September, so you still have time. Some of the things that are coming up in terms of programs on June 26th, which is this Friday, we are doing a webinar on losses around racial injustice. We still have a few seats available, so if you haven't signed up for that yet, I highly encourage you to do so. On June 30th, we're doing a program on cannabis usage at end of life, so that's also available to sign up if you haven't RSVP'd for that yet. I highly encourage you to do so. That is all I have for you. I don't see any questions from any of you right now, so I'm going to just go ahead and bid you a good day. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you, Dr. Aziz, for your time, as always.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. Kabir, do we need to talk about anything?